And so not only did we suffer from the initial exploitation, but after all the tailings, the uranium mill tailings, the waste, the water that was exploited in a very arid climate, we're using tremendous amounts of water for mining, but also the waste is left on our land. So from beginning to end, indigenous peoples, whether it's in Latin America or North America, we suffer on both ends of the spectrum of this exploitation.
So we know that the world that we're leaving to this next generation is filled with turmoil. But can you just speak a little bit about how you feel about the leadership and the direction of the next generation taking up the reins of struggle?
Oh, I feel very confident. I feel very proud because many of the young people of today are years ahead of where we were. Many of my children, and they're your age, they've grown up in this age of information. Whenever I get stumped on the computer, or I call my daughter or my grandson who's in junior high, and they get everything going in terms of any problems that I may be having with the computer. So, and as well, the struggles that we see in the indigenous peoples areas are being led by young people now. And so those of us that are on the threshold of our elder years, we feel very confident that we can turn over the reins because a lot of our indigenous young people have more access to education, have more access to information that puts them in a position to be ahead of where we were in terms of their knowledge and experience. And then we as elders can step in and try to help guide them through the struggle. But yes, I feel very confident in the young people of today, and I want to give them as much encouragement. I feel that they're in a very good position to keep the struggle for Mother Earth, for the sovereignty of indigenous peoples going.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate you coming out to speak with us tonight here on Radio Olin, and for all the work that you do for peoples everywhere. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Somos millones.
Gracias. That's right. And that's one of the quotes, right, of Tupac Amaru, who was the last Sapa Inca, or the last indigenous monarch in Peru. He said, "I will come back and I will be millions. You might kill me, but I will come back and I will be millions." Thank you so much, Bill, for keeping that spirit alive. All right, so another way that resistance is kept alive is through cultural resistance and through the work of so many amazing spaces here in our community that give creators, that give artists a place to share information, to share the creative spirit that is so much a part of not only indigenous cultures but everyone. So I'd like to say thank you to the Brava Theater and welcome Anastasia Cuellar, the director of the Brava Theater. So welcome to Londa Bajita. Thank you for being here with us on Radio Olin and for hosting us here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be on the radio with La Onda Bajita. I've been listening to this program forever, and it's a nice treat to be with you all here at Brava, at our home.
Right. Well, okay, if you could just give a little short bio of the Brava Theater. What happens here?
Well, this theater has been in the neighborhood since 1926. It's been in it started out as a vaudeville house and then was a movie house, but it's been a community center for film and performing arts for a very long time. My first time in this venue was in about 1984. I came to see a movie about machito. I had no idea about Cuban culture, and John Santos was here doing his first lecture on salsa music and the history of salsa music and presenting this film. And then after that, I volunteered to work at the Encuentro del Canto Popular, which was here in the 80s. I worked with Bill Martinez and all the folks at Acción Latina. At Encuentro, I met Dr. Loco there, and I met Tania Libertad and all these wonderful musicians. So, and then I continued to do stuff here. In 1996, Brava, the York Theater was bought by Brava for Women in the Arts, which was a company that produced plays about women and women's issues. And Brava bought the theater and transformed it into this wonderful performing arts space. And it's been a gem in our community ever since then. It's 360 seats. And over the last 4 years, Brava has really struggled to stay open during the recession. And last fall, it was almost lost to the community. It was foreclosed on, and then we were able to get it out, and I came on in February to help turn the organization around and get the building open to the community. And so we've been just working really hard to have more community events here, as well as professional artists and performing artists to come in and bring more culture to our community.
Well, I was just here a couple weeks ago for the Son Jarocho Festival.
In August.
In August, yes.
Yes.
And my goodness, what an amazing, amazing night. It was, or 3 days, I guess it was, sounds from Veracruz, from Oaxaca,
LA.
LA, artists here from San Francisco, everybody coming together in this beautiful fandango, in this beautiful, kind of meshing of styles and sounds, and even Sistema Bom, I think they were called. They brought this electronic music vibe to the jarana, beautiful rhythm and flavor, and to me it was, I don't know, something very special, because it brought together the old and the new.
Yes.
And it's so important that we have spaces in our community that are able to play that role, to be a home for that kind of cultural resistance.
Well, when you think about the 24th Street corridor, it has produced some amazing art over the last 50 years. You think about all the painters, writers, dancers, teatristas, parades, carnival, street festivals. It's so prolific, this neighborhood, and the cultural landscape that we've presented to make San Francisco a richer place to live, and the cultural activism that's come out of this neighborhood from Mission to Potrero is just tremendous. And so Brava is working really hard with Acción Latina, with Mission Cultural Center, with Presida Eyes, and we're trying to create this cultural corridor to maintain this amazing historical event that's been happening for so long, which in so many places in the city and other cities, the demographics are changing so much, and we're losing our cultural identity. So I think it's really important that we, as cultural organizations, get together and work hard to maintain that cultural landscape that we love so much.
Well, one of the things that's upcoming is the Mission Latin Jazz Festival. And this sounds pretty cool. This sounds like there's something going on. We have a special guest, Dr. Loco, who's a musician, a professor. Oh my goodness, so much. Dr. Loco, do you think that you could talk to us a little bit about the Latin Jazz Festival, what that is, how people can get connected here at the Brava to come and see that, and yeah, let us know what's going on.
Well, first of all, Sochi, thank you so much. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk about this terrific event, this terrific weekend that's happening here at the Brava Theater. The first annual Mission Latin Jazz Festival, and it's being produced by Acción Latina and by Camilo Landau, specifically for Acción Latina, and he has put in a tremendous amount of work and effort to put this thing together.
And just a minute, I gotta give big props to Brother Camilo, because he's actually coming on board as the music director for a short film that I'm doing about migrant people's rights.
Oh, wonderful.
So big ups to Brother Camilo.
Terrific young man who represents really the kind of talent that we see represented here in the mission, and his taking on this effort to put together the first annual.
He also put together the Son Jarocho Festival that was here in August.
Yeah, so if people came out to that and enjoyed the Son Jarocho Fest, they know that there's some of that same talent behind the Mission Jazz Fest, the Latino Jazz Fest.
And he's also got the Encuentro de Canto Popular happening here also at Brava in the immediate future in December. But this jazz festival really brings together an interesting combination of músicos. And I think that's one of the things about having someone like Camilo, who is a musician himself, who's grown up in this environment, who knows the musicians, who knows the past generations. I think he brings that kind of sense and sensibility, musical sensibility, to this organization. And so we put a really terrific program. On Saturday, we have the Josh Jones Latin Jazz Ensemble. And for folks that don't know Josh Jones, he's been a fixture, a Latin jazz fixture, a percussionist, drummer, here in the Bay Area, and particularly in the Mission, for many years. He's played with a number of musicians and inspired many more. So he's opening it up, and he's going to do a tribute to Ray Barreto. Ray Barreto, of course, being the king of the boogaloo and of the 60s groove. And so he's going to kick it off with that kind of groove. And then follow that will be an extraordinary ensemble, the Latin Jazz Youth Ensemble, led by Dr. John Calloway, who is also a San Francisco Arts Commissioner and teaches at San Francisco State. He has taught for many years at the San Francisco School District, working with children, teaching basics of music, elementary school kids, junior high school kids, or middle school kids and high school kids. Extraordinary educator, extraordinary committed musician who not only teaches but also plays with a significant number of groups. And so this Latin Jazz Youth Ensemble is extraordinary context for people to develop, for musicians to develop. And it's always exciting to see this group, because John has always had in his group tremendous talent that go on and lead. Once they graduate and go on to college or the universities, he has some Penderhughes who went on to Juilliard. He's got, that kind of talent. And so that's going to be very exciting. And then closing out the headliners on Saturday night is going to be the 1970s Missions All-Stars. That brings together us, John Calloway, Carl Pedraza, Anthony Blea, Greg Landau, David B. Love, Linda Tillery, and many others who are going to pull it together. These are the founders, the pioneers of this tradition.
Oh, my goodness. Well, so it sounds like there's a beautiful, beautiful weekend ahead of us. So if folks are interested, come on out to the Brava Theater, and that's brava.org, or people can go to accionlatina.org to learn a bit more about the Mission Jazz Fest.
Yes.
And so again, that's Brava, BRAVA.org.
And
I want to thank you guys so much. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Loco.
I just want to say about Sunday, because Sunday is also a really extraordinary day. We have, first of all, Grupo Adelante is going to kick it off and start it off, featuring Gary Flores and David Maldonado, and then followed by really someone who wouldn't necessarily be thought of as being part of a jazz festival. And it's Laura Reboso, who was one of the founders of Son de Madera, and she's got her ensemble Marinera, a women's ensemble, and they've just finished a women's album from Música Veracruzana, Música Jarocha, but with a jazz flavor that's going to really impress people. I think this is expanding the boundaries of jazz. And then the Pacific Mambo Orchestra, led by Kristen Tamerlan. And then my favorite group is going to be headlining it. This is VL Trio. This is Marcos Diaz, Carlos Caro, and Saúl Sierra, three musicians that have been magical musicians. They're not only musicians, they're magicians, and they're going to be playing some tremendous classic Cubano music that I just really have always wanted to hear. And they put together this trio, and I really invite everyone to come both Saturday and Sunday afternoon. Saturday we're going to start at 8 p.m., Sunday at 2 p.m. It's a tardeada on Sunday, so please come out and treat yourself both days. I know people who came out to the Jarocho Festival came out on Friday, and on Saturday they had to come back because it was such a great event. So we invite y'all to come on out, party with us. We'll be here Saturday and Sunday at the Brava Theater with the first annual Mission Latin Jazz Festival.
Mission Latin Jazz Festival. Thank you so much to the Brava Theater for hosting us here on Dia de la Raza. Thank you to you, Dr. Loco, for bringing that musical culture of resistance here to us. And, you know, today is so important because it's not only Dia de la Raza, but it is the day of the eagle and of the condor. In the Tonalmatl, it's the day that we have just come out of, the day of the eagle, or the Cuautli. And starting at 6 p.m., we have entered into the day of the condor, or yes, the Cosca Cuautli. And so honoring the Tonalmatl and honoring Dia de la Raza, we've come together here on Londa Bajita. We've just brought you this segment of Radio Olin to give truth to power, to continue the resistencia, continue luchando y resistiendo, and living through the larga noche of these 520 years so that we can shine. Because as Cuauhtémoc said, the sun will once again shine on us, and hopefully we're walking into those days.
Yes, we are. That was the voice of Xochitl Moreno. She is the hostess to Radio Olin, an important segment here that deals with the whole rising del Águila Negra. Órale. I'm Miguel Gavilan Molina, and you're listening here to La Onda Bajita on Radio del Barrio Aztlán. We're coming at you live tonight from the Brava Theater. That's right, in the heart of the Mission District, the Brava Theater here on 24th Street, corner of 24th and York in San Fran. The incredible film festival going on right now. And with me to talk a little bit about that, and of course who put a tremendous amount of work, is an all-time socio supporter here, not just of La Onda Pacifica Free Speech Radio, but also supporter of La Onda Bajita. And you know him as Tony Gonzalez. He's the director of the AIM West here, headquarters in San Francisco, longtime activist for indigenous affairs. And to us in the world of Aztlán, in the Chicanismo of it all, he's also AKA the Globetrotter. Welcome, Tony. It's always good to have you back on the mics here. Bringing information, bringing messages of spirit, messages of consciousness, messages of movement to our peoples, as in the tradition of Olin. A lot happening, Tony. It's good to have you here during this time. I know you put a lot of work here into the Brava Theater, especially the third annual, film series here on Native American issues. And what a lineup of films, documentaries, videos, really covering the global indigenous movements and things happening throughout the world.
Yes, and thank you, Miguel, and greetings all my relatives. And I really appreciate the radio be broadcasting right here from the Brava Theater Center in the heart of the Mission here in San Francisco. We have a great lineup of films, as you mentioned, today for the third annual American Indian Movement International Film Festival. MC, as many of your listeners heard, Bill Means being the MC. We also have Miss Victoria Gimmel, as MC, film presenter on the program. Right now, as I speak, Miguel, we're looking at a documentary of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate of 1991, Aung San Suu Kyi,
right.
of Burma.
Right.
And right now we're looking at Lady of No Fear. And it's a life story about her, her family situation. And well, I don't want to give too much about it. We still have a couple more hours of this film festival program. Our next film, for people that are driving over here to the Brava Theater, that's 2781 24th Street in the heart of the Mission. The next movie coming up in about 10-15 minutes will be the Onondaga presentation of the peoples of the East Coast and the spiritual game of lacrosse. That will be a 15-minute short. And then after that, we'll have our feature drama movie called Crooked Arrows. So people want to come and see that. That should be on in about another half hour, and that should take us on for the next hour and a half or so. But Miguel, what we intended to do with this third annual International American Indian Movement Film Festival, and the first time here at the Brava, but it's to bring attention to the struggles of indigenous peoples in different parts of the world. I want to qualify that by saying there will be the American Indian Film Festival next month for the next 2 weeks, beginning the first week in November. And by the way, one of those movies will be about Dennis Banks' new movie, and that will be at the Palace of Fine Arts on November 3rd. And so people to be aware of that. But what we're trying to do here at the International American Indian Movement Film Festival is bring indigenous peoples' voices and movies from the different regions of the world, not just Canada and U.S., but Mexico, Central, South America, the Pacific.
Right, and across the oceans.
And across the oceans. The Soviet Union, for example, there's a lot of Indians there on the East Coast. I say Soviet Union, of Russia, rather. So this is what we're trying to show is indigenous peoples in struggle, whether it's in participatory democracy in the electoral process, such as we have witnessed with Evo Morales, or even more recently with Rigoberto Menchú running for president in Guatemala, to armed struggle, armed resistance, when people are just fed up and have tried all other solutions and resolutions and getting it on, such as we see with the Zapatistas in Mexico, for example, or even here that we are seeing the Burmese movies. We saw before Lady of No Fear. Another Burmese movie that we saw today was Into the Current, and it's a documentary about prisoners referred to as ethnic minorities, but we know and you know that they are indigenous peoples, Indian peoples of that land. So this takes us into the broader spectrum of human rights, whereas the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2007. And I have to say that with all the countries signing, there are a few abstentions, but the last 4 countries that signed it, people know, was Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. In 2010, President Obama said that he supports and he endorses the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That is the question. We want it signed. We want the ink. We want a picture of the ink. But I wanted to say that in the case of Burma, for example, they too have signed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. But the people themselves are ignorant about it, and the country itself, like many countries, including the United States, lack the political will to implement those 46 rights, 46 articles that are enshrined in that declaration.
So it's a lot of the government officials and so forth. Well, there's been a lot of criticism at the fact that the declaration within government, certain governments, doesn't have any teeth, for enforcement.
Unfortunately or fortunately, that's going to be up to us, because we're going to have to seize the rights that we have. And so it's up to us at the ground level, in whatever country we are, who has adopted that declaration, that we make sure that it's implemented, that we try to find the mechanisms and also developing partnerships and alliances for this to become a reality. It's going to be a push by the citizenry in every country to apply the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and developing the infrastructure and
to reinforce,
to develop the dialogue, for this to happen. And in the process, you're educating the general public. You're making them aware that indeed indigenous peoples have inherent rights that have existed long before these colonial governments came on to those lands. So
right. Well, as we
that's the big picture.
Yeah, and there's something else happening too that I think that's unifying, particularly here in the Americas, this in the Western Hemisphere, and that is the assault on the most sacred food. basically, in reality here in the Americas, it is the core of the civilization of indigenous peoples, and that is corn. There's a massive assault against the sacred corn, and there's a lot of activity. People are coming together. People are looking at it. I know that you've taken a lot of interest, on the GMO invasion against our corn. I mean, if we look at corn in the history of corn, it's basically, the whole NAFTA thing that, Bill Clinton
Kicked it
forced
off.
down. Exactly. That GMO corn invaded and has contaminated even some of the most remote regions of the Americas, with the GMO, altered corn.
Yes, and in fact, it was January 1st, 1994, with the adoption of the NAFTA. Immediately the day after, tortillas in Mexico went up. They began to soar. They started to increase the price of tortillas. It's almost like creating a revolution over tortillas. Like people never thought it would happen.
Well, when they raised the price, there was also literally potential riots. I mean, hundreds and thousands of people hit the streets.
Yeah, similar to food riots.
Right.
So, of course, the genetically modified organisms and that whole industry led by none other than Monsanto. And by the way, there's California ballots that we have to look at that refer to that. I believe it's Proposition 37.
37.
Yeah, that we really have to talk up a little bit more about as we go along in the politics of things. But that's a part of the assault, the attack, and the challenge that we have to protecting food sources under the guise of food security. Lest all foods get contaminated, and then we become for sure dependent on the corporations to provide us, with the necessary foods, and they in the meantime will be hoarding the real seeds of the foods. So there is that whole campaign for securing seedlings, for the future, as opposed to having a bag and bucket full of hybrids that aren't worth anything after the first year.
Right, can't reproduce itself. I've noticed in the last year, heirloom festivals, heirloom conferences, there's even a bank up in the North Bay in Sonoma County that deals with heirloom seeds. It's a seed bank. I went in there one day, I go, wow. They have preserved the Indian corn, they have preserved maize, and squash. These are two basic, Indian foods here. Mm-hmm. The corn, the squash, and the beans. But again, I know that you and, AIM has taken a stand. I know the work around the UN is really looking at this, spreading of the contamination of our most sacred food. But at this point, Tony, there's a lot of issues happening, not just here across Indian land in the United States, but also the Americas. But overall, there's this consciousness. I know that back in, 1992, that's roughly what now it's going to be. 20 years, that brought the consciousness of the Norte and the South, the North and the South, and Sur, by the eagle representing the North, the condor, the South. Well, those efforts have now unified the continent to where the whole idea of America is not a country, it's a continent. I mean, people have gotten that. But now, I know through a lot of work that AIM has done, AIM through, AIM's international arm, Treaty Council, and what they've been doing, is really developing a global indigenous consciousness to where, you're not only indigenous if you are from the Americas, but now you're indigenous if you're native peoples from throughout the world. Have you seen that evolution?
Oh yeah, of course, and I have to bring it back home here to the Bay Area, Miguel, because the signal to the world that the Indian people are very much alive and well emanates from here, from the Bay Area, with the occupation at Alcatraz.
So that leap by Richard Oakes.
Richard Oakes, and by the way, we had his daughter here, Fawn, and her son here visiting with us with Eloy Martinez,
Right,
but Richard
Wonderful.
Oakes and Mickey Gimmel,
Right.
who's passed on to Spirit World, but his daughter was here too, and she was Victoria Gimmel.
Right,
she was
right.
the film presenter along with Bill Means emceeing the program. So the San Francisco, the Bay Area, Alcatraz has a place in the history of this consciousness, global consciousness, as you say, that kicked off right here, not only in 1969 in the occupation, from the planning of the students, Mickey and Richard Oakes at San Francisco State and all that, but even before that, years before that, 1964, Bill Means, who was here speaking, his family, his father, his relatives, the Lakota people, took the island, Alcatraz, back in 1964 as first steps, and that was the precedence to the occupation in 1969, raising the awareness. And here, like 30, 40 years later, in 2007, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is signed. So this whole consciousness, awareness, it took time to build up. Even you refer to 1992, the kickoff of the Indian consciousness, and the well-known conference that was held in Quito, Ecuador, by indigenous peoples, and even as far back as the 70s and 80s, building up to that conference in 1992 in Quito. It takes planning, it takes strategy, and these indigenous peoples, I say these indigenous peoples, are many, many times referred to as the intelligentsia, the movers and the shakers, those that are looking ahead with a vision, constructively, and how to bring their people forward. This is the intelligentsia at work in our communities and in the international, to make a reality, to help face a destiny and the challenges, that we're faced. We need people like this, and we need actions.
There's a lot happening. I think what you're talking about, there's been an unbelievable surge amongst, I'm going to call Mexica groups, Chicano, Chicanas, in the last 30 years, in the last 40 years, thanks to people like yourself, Tony, people like Gustavo, Tupac, throughout the Southwest here, that were there, in the late 60s, with that whole consciousness of connecting ourselves to the land, and through your work and others, Tona Tierra and those groups, building a foundation.
And we had teachers among our own communities, like Takayelel, from Mexico, just passed on.
Andres Segura.
Andres Segura, another maestro.
Right.
So, teaching all these little enclaves of Chicano or Azteca, Mexica dancers,
Right. Recently I
in the
heard
60s and into the 70s, it's beginning to blossom.
Right,
And now
it
we're
is.
looking at this renaissance. We're wondering how it happened. Well, the semillas
started
were planted, years ago.
30, 40 years ago. And I know yourself, you've been in it since the beginning. I know you brought me into this path, and what I call the red path, and I've been on it for since my 20s, and in it, through your works and efforts, the gates were open, and now there's this massive surge, within the Conciencia Mexica, and through Floyd Red Crow Westerman, our elder and kind of our leader who passed on to the spirit world, and others, Vern Bellencourt, who realized that the Chicanos, or Chicanoa, as I call it, were the largest indigenous groups within the U.S. territories. And that conciencia, I've seen it take root, and I've seen it evolve to where now I go to, I've heard stories of people being in South Dakota at the powwow. I've heard people being at different powwows throughout the country, and there is the Mexica dancers. They show up, they travel, they caravan. They're part of that circle, bringing that, in a sense, completing that circle, unifying North and South as one peoples. And again, a lot of that is a tribute to your work on, works of others, as I named before. But here we are, 2012. We're probably, facing one of the most important, if not crucial, elections in our time. and where are Indian people? Where are the Chicano nation?
I think that's a good point leading into Miguel to realize that now it's gone global. We're a part of that globalization, and in our maturity, over the years from the 60s and the 70s and now into the winter of our lives, so to speak, we do begin to grasp, or maybe myself, not you so much, but that this is indeed a protracted struggle. We can't be so hasty to want it cambiadas de volada, but to realize that we're on the shoulders of people before us who laid out the groundwork for the struggle, la lucha. Not to falter, to find the strength, the spirit, to rejuvenate yourself and continue on and try to be fearless. In the midst of all this. So it's that protracted. And now that we're into an election period here in 2012, we as the American Indian Movement and AIM West and activists in the Southwest and the West Coast, we're having a conference here in San Francisco.
That's right.
And we're planning to have it here
at the Brava Theater.
At the Brava Theater, November 19th and the 20th. And we're going to talk about, how far we've come as indigenous people, as Chicanos, as intertribal. We're inviting all Indian people. And that means white Indians, too, if you're so inclined to be indigenous, to find the challenges together and finding solutions together. Next month is that meeting, and it's going to be here in San Francisco, November 19 and 20. And we're going to start off, Miguel, by looking at the 1972 Trail of Broken Treaties and the 20-point program Indian Manifesto of that time. Now, mind you, 1972, not even the freedom of religion was passed. It didn't happen until 1978 for Indian people to have Sundance, to have sacramental ceremonies and other ceremonies that had to go underground. It was in public and signed and made into law for us to be allowed that until 1978, if you can imagine that. Wow. The Indian Child Welfare Act, was also became a reality in 78. So looking at this declaration of 1972, the Trail of Broken Treaties, is going to be part of the theme for next month, with a vision of the future. What does the how do you integrate the current declaration on the rights of indigenous peoples by the UN General Assembly? Yeah, how do you mash that together with our 20-point program of 1972 in light of post-elections? Because elections are going to be happening here when November 4.
Right.
And so our meeting, the 19th and 20th, comes at a good time to begin to look at everything in retrospection and how to deal with the challenges of the future together, with looking at that document of 1972, when we were desperate and there were so many anti-Indian legislation and bills going through the Congress, and Dennis Banks and other leaders, Bill Wapapaw, began a walk across America. 1978, the longest walk, to raise attention from village to village, town to town, city to city, all the way to Washington, D.C. And, by golly, that walk was effective. That walk was effective because all those bills that was going through the legislation were shot down. And, in fact, new ones, were introduced and passed, such as I mentioned, the Freedom of Religion Act, and the Indian Child Welfare Act, and several others. But that was a very effective strategy by the men and women of the American Indian Movement at that time, including Miguel, in the midst of all that. 1977, the American Indian Movement was one of the few organizations that sponsored an international conference for indigenous peoples of the world in Geneva, Switzerland, and brought all Indian people from all the four corners, the four directions, for the very first time in our genetic history.
I've seen pictures of all of those. I mean, a lot of those that participated are no longer with us here.
Yes, and that's true. And but they planned together 1977, and that 1977 conference. By the way, here locally, another person that was active at that time was Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz and Shockey Gotthard, and as well as Bill Means, who is among us here. Bill Wapapa, Russell Means, Orrin Lyons, and people.
John Deere was there.
Throughout, Philip Deere, of
right.
course, was there as well. So we have a lot to reflect on as we move forward, and think of those that passed on, before us, to give us the strength to continue in the steps and the course, the direction that they helped set for us. That mustn't be forgotten. So we do have. As indigenous peoples, there's growth and development, both as Chicanos like myself, coming into my being, and my peoples, the Kumkak, or referred to as Seri people of Mexico, aware of Sonora, the desert, and through my life, having been born here in Califas and separated in foster homes. Many of my brothers and sisters were just coming back, so we're going into our own age of Aquarius, so to speak, our rediscovering our roots and asserting that and being proud of that and sharing that with our kids, our coming generations, getting back to who we are and joining the fight, not only to save our people and our cultura and society in general, but how can we survive on this planet, sacred Mother Earth, that's under attack, being plundered and pillaged by corporations, being raped? Whether it's the land and the resources, or sucking up the oil and contaminating in the process. We as a people, as indigenous peoples, because we're all indigenous of this land, have to come together and assert our right to our survival and to the coming generations, and develop probably somewhat of a universal, Miguel, some kind of a universal rights of Mother Earth, similar to what Evo Morales and the Bolivian peoples and the people of the world that met there 2-3 years ago came out with this declaration.
That's an incredible idea, and it's something that we should all think about, ponder, and try to make that a reality. I'd like to thank you, Tony, for joining us here, sharing your insightful views and, of course, perspective on the current issue here across Indian land and the world of indigenous peoples. And again, that was the voice of Tony Gonzalez. He is the director of AIM West here in San Francisco. Tony, real quickly, give people the phone and the way they can reach out, maybe get involved.
Thank you. People, everything I've said and some of the subjects that we refer to can be found in our website, and that's at www.aimwest.info. That's aimwest.info, where people could go directly to the American Indian Movement website at www.aimovement.org. Okay, so you can go there, aimovement.org. And another person, before I leave, in particular, keep in mind, and that is Leonard Peltier, in prison now 37 years. People can go to that website for more information at www.whoisleonardpeltier.info.
All right, and again, that was the voice of Tony Gonzalez, director from AIM West, and one of the principal organizers of this American Indian Film Festival, third annual here at the Brava Theater. You're listening to La Onda Bajita, Radio del Barrio Aztlán. Yo soy el Gavilán Molina. I'm here with Alacrán Gutierrez and Pedro Pepe Reyes and Xochitl Moreno. We'd like to thank our other crew member at the mothership there in Basurclas, and that is La Brava, who's in control. And I'm going to ask Xochitl to come over here and join us here in a conversation we're going to have with Alacrán. But first of all, this is KPFA 94.1 FM, and KPFB at 89.3 FM here in Berkeley, with KFCF at 88.1 FM in Fresno. You're cruising on Free Speech Radio, Pacifica Network. We are La Onda Bajita's crew. We march, we protest, and we report. And tonight we're here in the heart of the Mission District in San Francisco's La Brava Theater. That's right. It's a great place here. A great compañera socia of mine, a.k.a. La Dr. Loca, Stacy Cuyar, is now the director here, and opened up this place for us to do this broadcast. But I just want to say for you folks, earlier we were having some major technical difficulties, and our on the spot here technical director Pedro Reyes, also co-host of La Onda, was able to devise a way for us to broadcast, and through streaming we were able to do it. So there was a quick half a minute interruption. We like to apologize for that, but we're back here strong in bringing you the information. Sometimes we have to be creative and use other means to get the message out, but the message is delivered, and that's what we do here at La Onda. Now we're getting ready here for Alacran Gutierrez. Welcome back to La Onda Bajita, and as you know, Alacran is the voice behind the 420, the 420 report here, what we call the 420 Radio Cafe. In the house today to bring us an update here on what's happening across not only California, Northern California, but across the country in the battle to lift the prohibition on cannabis, and particularly medicinal cannabis. Welcome back, Lacan. It's good to have you back on the mics here. It's been quite a day here, but we're right in the middle of it here. And joining us is going to be Xochitl, who might want to ask some questions along with myself. But for right now, welcome back to La Onda. It's good to have you on board.
Muchas gracias, Miguel. Again, this is José Alacrán Gutiérrez con La Onda Verdes 420 Reporte. So, Miguel, one of the things that I was in Los Angeles last week, and I was covering the normal convention there, and the theme for the convention was the last days of prohibition. And I really feel that, these laws that prohibit marijuana and cannabis and medicinal marijuana are really doomed. You see this administration really struggling to be able to deal with what's happening throughout the country, with 17 states adopting medical marijuana laws. And this week, Miguel, check this out. This week in Washington, D.C., for the first time in over 20 years, the United States Court of Appeal will be hearing an oral argument in a lawsuit that is challenging the federal government in the classification of marijuana as a dangerous drug with no medicinal values. Right now, marijuana is classified like heroin, and actually, since opiates do have some medicinal value, it's classified as being more dangerous. But Americans for Safe Access has sued the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And this is a historical case because it's going to force the federal courts to finally review the scientific evidence regarding the therapeutical efficiency of marijuana. So, with that, putting that in the type of perspective, is that you're gonna have on let me see, I believe it's the 16th of October, which is next week. The United States Court of Appeal in D.C. is going to start hearing the opening arguments, and Americans for Safe Access, Joe Elfert, is going to be the one to be doing the arguing. And as the movie's letting out, we hear the people coming out. So if you get distracted by the noise, it's just letting out of the película. But like I was saying, this is the first time in over 20 years that the United States government is going to have to defend their scientists against the medical marijuana scientists. And so what's really interesting is that it has a really local flavor. Not only is Joe Elfer, the chief counsel for Americans for Safe Access, going to be arguing it, but it's a coming of age for Americans for Safe Access. It's an organization that's been dealing with medical marijuana issues for the last 10 years, and here we are in Washington being heard on the D.C. circuit. And another, Dr. Donald Abrams, who is the chief, I believe is hematology and oncology here at San Francisco General, just up the street here on La 24, described medical marijuana as the chief. Well, the way he describes it is that it's the most effective treatment in the regimen for cancer and HIV patients, and he's been dealing with that here for years, and it seems how much medical marijuana does help out the gente. There's a lot at stake here, because we're talking about an administration that is blocking everything that it can to not allow the use of medical marijuana, not allow the use of marijuana, not allow the research of marijuana. And here we are now finally going to be able to be heard in Washington. And you know, it also goes into a lot into the value of the herbs that are used, not just in the sacred ceremonies, but also in California, which is, I believe, at the forefront of this fight against not just relegalizing marijuana and cannabis as medicinal, but also in ending the incarceration of thousands and thousands of people. You know, if marijuana is rescheduled in the near future, that's going to put a big dent in the prison industrial complex, and how many people are put away. And you know, as here in the city of San Francisco, the average arrest rate for marijuana possession in the African American community is 19 to 1. So that means for every white American, 19 African Americans are incarcerated, with 6% of the population in California, and yet 44% of the prison population. It's going to put a lot of people at ease when you can reschedule marijuana and actually have some medicinal value and have it, you know, taken out of the classification that it is right now. Sochi, did you want to jump in on this?
I think it's so right, Alacran, that you bring up this idea of the PIC, of the prison industrial complex, and of our peoples, you know, being in there, and the effects that medical cannabis being not considered something medical, not being considered what it truly is, a medicine that came from our peoples, has led to the effect of our peoples being locked up, being put in a cycle where our communities then suffer. You know, let's maybe pause and talk about that for a second, because there was this new report that came out, 240,000 marijuana possession arrests in Washington state in the last 25 years. So blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans were disproportionately arrested. 25 years of arrests have cost Washington state $300 million or more. So we're looking at not just a cost to our communities, but a cost to the taxpayers. This is ridiculous when we can understand that this is a sacred medicine that's been taken into a different context. And I think it's so important that on Dia de la Raza that we reconocer, that we, you know, really give recognition to the fact that our native medicines, not only medical cannabis, but also tobacco, have been taken out of their ceremonial usage, of their indigenous use, and turned into something that is then harming the community in terms of health, in terms of our, you know, introduction into the prison industrial complex, and so many other issues.
Well, you know, you bring up Washington, but then also you want to look at New York City itself with the stop and frisk. When you talk about that, disproportionately Latinos and African Americans are the ones that are being stopped and frisked. You know, on the average, I believe they said something like, you know, 60,000 stops a month, that people that get stopped and frisked. And and the funny thing about like marijuana in New York, let's say somebody gets stopped and frisked, and you know they're being patted down, and all of a sudden the officer feels something in their pocket. Well, it's not really against the law to have the marijuana in your pocket, but it is to have it out in the open. So the police officer could tell someone that they're stopped and frisked to pull out whatever they have in their pocket, and once it's pulled out and it's visible, then they're arrested and taken downtown. And so it just adds, like you said, it adds to this prison industrial complex. The prison system now is traded on Wall Street. It's not, you know, there's no more rehabilitation when you have a prison construction being funded by Wall Street companies.
If I may jump in here real quickly, Alacran, it seems to me, and after being involved in watching this movement, there's an industry, that has evolved from arrests. With state police, when local county sheriff's department, when local municipalities, local police, city, town police, make it their priority, to arrest, make these unbelievable arrests. I mean, I'm looking at this report here, 250,000 people in 10 years, for marijuana possessions and costing taxpayers 300 millions. It costs that much because, you incarcerate people on these minor drug so-called charges. And then it creates jobs for bailiffs. It creates jobs for attorneys, both defense attorneys and prosecutors. I mean, I've been at so-called drug cases, and everybody there, is working class or poor, who got busted, who got arrested for minor possession or, minor growing. Nothing huge, nothing big, but it creates jobs for lawyers. It creates jobs for judges. It creates jobs for all of these people involved in the legal, arm of the government and its prosecution.
And stockbrokers, because, like the majority of these private prisons are being traded on Wall Street. So, it goes deep. It goes really deep. And I think the average cost per prisoner per year is somewhere like $153,000 for every prisoner. So let's
just to house that person.
Just to house them and to keep the whole system going. So that that's a lot of money. I mean, just think about this: if they were to give that money, let's say $153,000 to a prisoner to stop doing whatever drugs they're doing, I mean, how much better off would that human being be?
Or if we can look back to the solutions that we had before things like the prison industrial complex existed, things like our ancestors, use systems that they used to deal with problems. There were intergenerational relationships that have been destroyed. There were means of coming to a solution through conflict that have been thrown by the wayside, and we've been left by an injustice system that quite frankly doesn't work, that is not functional. And so, I'm asking this question to myself so often: what can we do to try and return to some of these older models? And, what can we do to try and return medical cannabis to its proper usage and to, its honored place in our society?
Well, at one point there was peace officers and there was rehabilitation plan. For if you went to prison, you were, people, they try to rehabilitate you. They had a system where, you would be taught either a trade or you'd be taught something. But now it's not. Now it's a housing. They're housing people. And warehousing. And I mean, there's in some of the federal prisons and some of the state prisons, they're using, yards. They're housing people outdoors. They're housing people in gymnasiums. They're housing, triple stacking the tents that we see in Arizona. And just imagine living in a tent in Arizona for months on end because you were caught with, some marijuana, or you ran a stop sign or something minimal.
Or driving while brown.
Well, that seems to be the biggest.
Juan Crow in action. Yeah. Juan Crow.
And you asked the question, what are we going to do? I think some of the cities, that have seen medical marijuana help out, like the city of Oakland, the way they're fighting back is they've actually filed a lawsuit in federal court. The city of Oakland is filed this in district court and to stop the asset forfeitures and the seizure of the Oakland buildings by the federal government. And that's one way, I think, suing the federal government to leave municipalities alone to regulate their industry, the medical marijuana industry. Another thing that we see is, up in Santa Rosa, where we saw the 150 police officers sent out into a neighborhood, a Latino neighborhood, where they use catchwords, like now they use the word gang member to describe brown people, or they use the word cartel to describe people, so that they can play
Mexican descent.
They can play it exactly. They can play it out in the newspapers where they can justify a military takeover of an entire neighborhood, and then go after anyone they want to. And what happened there is they cordoned off the streets. They came in with one of those urban assault vehicles, the tanks that were made famous by the Los Angeles PD when they were at the height of the crack epidemic. And so they march this tank through town, down the freeway. They take over an entire neighborhood. They do their exercise, and the federal government spends, I would say, to deploy 150 people into one neighborhood, to bring in from probably all over the country. It had to be $1 million plus operation for 4 or 5 hours of raid.
And I remember that raid. What shocked me at first, I said to myself, these people had backyard gardens, half a dozen plants, maybe 10 plants. I mean, there was no farms, orchards. Now, there's other areas where there's, hundreds of plants, hundreds of, there's actually, orchards of marijuana, cannabis. But here, it was just backyard, growing.
Exactly.
And it's like, wait a second, you're spending all these resources. The other thing that was a little nerve-shaking for me, rattling, was that I saw Alacran, the forces that came in were like military. It wasn't your local police. These were like, military police strategically coming in, with armament on their backs, I mean, they came in it was like they're coming in as an invasion. I'm going, wait a second. As you said, you probably spent, close to $1 million to do this operation, and what? Everybody there got arrested and filed with what? Misdemeanor charges.
Well,
unreal.
In Sonoma County, the supervisors passed a medical marijuana ordinance where they allow people to have 30 plants. So if you have 30 plants, it can look big, but it really, you're not getting the numbers. And it first came out where I believe it was like 380 plants were taken out of 32 homes, or 32 homes were raided. And then they issued the story, and then they said thousands of plants were there, or 1,000. But it's still, it does not justify the military takeover of an entire neighborhood, the terrorizing of the people. You saw pictures in the local paper where there's a father handcuffed and a mother standing there holding her baby, waiting for a search warrant to come in to search their house. The majority of the people that were arrested were taken, and they weren't charged, but they were deported. That's my belief, because there was no charges anywhere.
Well, some persons, not everybody there was undocumented. Some people were detained. I don't know if deportations proceedings
have happened. There was 14 or 15 arrests, and 13 of them were taken to San Francisco, and most likely were all on immigration holds, because we did the research. We couldn't find that they were charged with anything. So that means they took over this entire neighborhood and really didn't find much there. Now, if you really look, we talked about big gardens. If you look back in the last couple of years, the biggest garden that's been found was 50 acres in Fresno, in the Fresno area, which, believe it or not, is the second most depressed area in the country. I mean, that's the second most porous
zone in this region in the United States.
In the United States. So you're looking at some of the reasons why people would cultivate marijuana. It's the prohibition. If there wasn't the type of prohibition that we see here in California against the medical marijuana industry and the marijuana itself, then you wouldn't see poor neighborhoods and people that are under financial stress having to go out and cultivate and try to either take it to the medicinal market and try to earn a little extra money to balance off. I mean, we're talking about poor neighborhoods. We're talking about poor areas of the country.
The area in Santa Rosa and Sonoma County was one of the most poorest areas in West County, southern Santa Rosa. But let me, the thing that makes me a little concerned here is just how, under the guise of shutting down cannabis gardens, they're bringing in military operations, and talking about military operations at the end of this month, in in Alameda County, they're going to launch a thing called Urban Shield. It's frightening. They're going to combine military under the guise of preparedness in case of natural disasters like earthquakes or tsunami. They also said that it would be preparedness for in the event that there's a hostage situation or terrorist threat. Now, I looked at their site. You can actually go to Urban Shield and see this. It's pretty frightening. I mean, when I went into their site and I'm looking at it, it's all military. And I said to myself, where's the fire departments here? Where's the CHP? Usually the CHP, Jose, is involved with, the state. They're like a state police. I go, where's the CHP here? Where is the ambulance? Where's the Red Cross? Nothing. All military.
Well, it sounds more like ocupa del barrio, occupying the barrios more than emergency preparedness.
But here's exactly, I said to myself, emergency preparedness in the military? Now, what's up with that? I mean, it's frightening because there is something, I believe, somewhere in the Constitution, somewhere written on the laws of this land, that has separated military from civilian participation, from being involved in civilian areas. And here we are, the Alameda Sheriff has developed a country, this is the model that's going to be used for urban centers in the United States. Alameda County is about to initiate this model and make it, nationwide. And they're talking about bringing drones in to start going through people's houses. They can look into your house, and it's frightening because this is the guys. They're bringing military and they're fusing it within local jurisdictions. At the same time, they're laying off police. They're cutting back budgets. They're cutting back sheriff departments. All of this stuff, and with what? And they're going to replace it with military.
Well, I believe that Patriot 2, the Patriot 2 Act is what this is all being worked under. And I mean, a lot of the people in Santa Rosa believe that the raid in the backyard gardens was not just for the marijuana; it was for exercise to combine all the forces. The FBI, the Homeland Security, the INS, the DEA, the
ICE.
Highway Patrol, the sheriff's departments. Bring them all together under one umbrella, have them do an exercise, take over a barrio, because all they had to do was say that it's a gang stronghold or it's gang related, so they have to show that show of force, and then the rest of the white America can say, oh, you're right, if there are gang members there, you can bring in your paramilitary, and this paramilitary is everywhere. If they're doing it in small communities like Santa Rosa, they are going to be doing it in large communities like Oakland. They've had other task force that they run in Oakland.
Well, remember way back, you and I, when they brought in Operation Tomahawk, when Jerry Brown was the mayor of Oakland and Willie Brown was the mayor of San Francisco. Willie Brown wouldn't have nothing to do with it. And that was where the military, the armed forces came in, and they were willing to pay, millions to Willie Brown, and Willie Brown said no. So they went across the bay to Jerry Brown, and Jerry Brown said absolutely. Because that was when he set up that school, Hard Knock School, ROTC, come down and beat down kids and force, potential youth in crisis to become militarized. But in that operation, we were there at 4 o'clock in the morning, when they invaded Oakland. I mean, the military, helicopters, boats that unloaded massive amount of soldiers, trucks, and between 4 in the morning that day and by 8 o'clock that morning, they had secured Oakland. They even hired, I believe, 2,000 actors to act as protesters and so forth. Well, that was frightening. Well, here is something even bigger, because now, when they did those exercises, I think they did it here and other locations across the country. They were doing it, before training to invade urban centers in the Middle East, because they knew that the war that they were going to launch in Iraq, the war they were going to launch in Afghanistan, was going to be urban wars. So they prepared for that. Now they're getting ready to initiate Urban Shield, and that's a little frightening.
Well, if we can learn anything from what happened in the post-Katrina climate, where an urban center was militarized, where they were supposed to be doing disaster relief, well, I'm sorry, what we know is that poor people were targeted, were taken down, and their reputations were tarnished, along with the health and the vibrancy of the community. So looking back on that, it seems like this is a pretty daunting, prospect.
Well, how can I put this without sounding... Okay, a lot of people believe that there is something big going on within the federal government. There is some kind, I don't want to sound, use the word conspiracy, but what about, if they are getting ready to figure out some kind of unrest, and who are they going to target? What peoples? Well, they're going to target the poor. We see it all over the world. We see it in Europe. We see it in Saudi Arabia, where they target the poor sectors. If there's no unrest, Bahrain, wherever there's civil unrest, the military is who comes in. It's not the police forces that quell down. It's not the Red Cross. It's not people coming out there and feeding the poor. It's not people that are coming out there and helping out the poor. No, it's the military that comes in with la mano dura, takes over, and it passes, justice. And the thing is that, Miguel, one of the things that we have to understand, the military has a different code than law enforcement. A peace officer or policeman knows that he is part of the civilian code, that he has a way of handling a crisis. Well, the military, they have a different code, and that code is shoot first. They take over in a different style. If there's unrest in the community, you have police officers that are dealing with it. They will deal with it differently than what the military is. Now, when you're blending both of these together, when the police forces are being blended into the military, and they're following orders of the military, we don't know what's going to happen. There could be some really, really nasty stuff going down, and no one will be accountable. There's no one, you can't sue that police department, because all of a sudden they're all deputized under, federal law or martial law or whatever might have you.
Well, Alacran, we got a couple of minutes here. Any last closing statement you'd like to give the folks out there? I know you've got an issue facing yourself, and, we're ready to support, your efforts in the defense of yourself.
Yeah, I have a court date coming on the 28th of November. That's next month, the 28th. So if anybody wants to show up and do some court support, it'll be in Oakland Court there on Oakland Federal Court on the 28th at 2:30. 2:30. And you can look it up online. And again, I think the most important thing that's happening right now is this hearing next week on the 16th in D.C., where they're going to look at the rescheduling of medical marijuana. This is science against science. This is the medical marijuana people, scientific research against the federal government scientific research, and we need to really support the Americans for Safe Access in their fight against the federal government and the DEA.
How can people contact ASA to give that kind of support, or to volunteer for some kind of participation?
Well, like any other nonprofit, they're always in need of resources. So if there's somebody that wants to donate some money, I know we're always asking for money here. That's one thing. The other thing is you can go to Americans for Safe Access, and they have Americans for Safe Access Now is their website. Again, that's Americans for Safe Access Now, and you can find them on Facebook. You can find them on their own webpage. But it's like any other nonprofit. There's a lot at stake, and this is a battle that they're fighting for everybody.
And we'll keep you informed on that. That was the voice of Jose Alacran Gutierrez with the 420 report. And now we have a brief, quick barrio service announcement. Xochitl?
All right. So on that cultural resistance tip, Friday, November 2nd, another very important day for La Raza. We're going to have Quinto Sol kicking it off live in San Francisco at the Elbow Room. That's 647 Valencia Street. And if they want to, if Raza wants to come out, dance to some beautiful music, celebrando Dia de los Muertos, that's a way that they can come together and create some community.
That's right. And now, this is Miguel Gavilan Molina. I'm going to say a raton. I'm here with Pedro Pepes Reyes, our technical director here at Live Remotes, and my co-producer of La Onda Bajita, Alacran Gutierrez with the 420 radio. And Xochitl Moreno with Radio Orlin. Like to say, pues a rato, like to thank the Brava Theater here, in particular Anastasia Cuyar for opening up the venue here to us, and to Tony Gonzalez, Bill Means, and everyone involved in the film festival here, the third annual AIM West presentation of Native films. For now, I'm going to send it back to La Brava at the mothership. Again, thank you, Stacy, and for this evening here, and this is a cultural area for the mission. Now we're going to send it back to La Brava at the mothership. Stay tuned for the next half hour of La Onda Bajitas, Radio del Barrio Aztlán. Órale.